morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabweans are familiar with political fanaticism and is normally associated with Zanu PF. So a scene like this one here that is very, very familiar to many Zimbabweans. But I think if anyone thought that was only confined to Zanu PF, well, listen to this.
I support Baba Chipenet ngavafome dzavo politics dzavo zvodedzera kuti ivo vana hopo chingono naiye Mandaza ngavafome dzavo vagona kana nhunzi inombovatevera hakuna kana one anombovatevera tiri kuda Chamisa isu we are going to stand with Nelson Chamisa chero nhasi Nelson Chamisa akanzi ana pati ndomumira kusvika wana pati iwe Ibbo Mandaza iwe newe nhangirikira hopo chingono kumusha kwenyu unonwa nhamo tora zvokupenga tora zvokumama zvamuri kutaura izvi ausapoti Baba Chipeneti mapenzi avanhu ava vanotora hanzi zvoni Chamisa kuti kudii Chamisa chii chacho.
Well, we don't have to listen to the end of that one. The point has been made. I think the most important thing here to note is that Zimbabweans have this affinity to lose the substantive issues, to lose sight of the substantive issues and focus on the trivial. Some of the issues that Hopewell, Chinono, and Ibbo Mandaza raised in their commentary are the substantive issues, and those must be addressed. And the substantive issues are that the opposition, the MDC, CCC, have been on the political stage for the last 24 years, including 5 in the GNU. They have failed to implement even one democratic reform. That is the substantive issue here. Last year, Nelson Chamisa conned people to believe that CCC was going to win big and they should participate in the flawed elections. And they did, in their millions, only to give Zanu PF legitimacy. That is the substantive issue. That is what must be addressed here. As for Hopewell Chinono and Ibbo Mandaza's that they must form their own political party and so forth, that is not the substantive issue. We must focus on the substantive issues. So that is issue number one. And sorry, before I leave that one, it is important that this is not a new thing. This is a very common thing. The gentleman I've got on the screen there is the late Eddison Zvobgo. He said when he was in Zanu PF that this was a common feature in the party. Whenever they engaged in any serious discussion, if his colleagues were losing, the debate, they would forget the substantive issue and focus on the trivial issue. And he called it the Mozambique syndrome. Whether we like it or not, this Mozambique syndrome has stifled debate within the ruling party at a national level and in the opposition. As much as people can think they can get away with focusing on the trivial issue and hope that the substantive issue will go away, the truth of the matter is the substantive issue will still remain. We still need to address those substantive issues. And so we should forget this idiotic practice of ignoring the substantive issues and focusing on the trivial issues. And I really would like people to look at what Eddison Zvobgo was saying about this Mozambique syndrome. We are not going to avoid the fact that Zimbabwe is a failed state by focusing on the trivial issues. The other 3 points that I would like to bring up here is is that anyone who aspires or holds public office is democratically accountable to the people, regardless of whether they are members of the said leader's political party or not. Chamisa is therefore per se accountable to the people of Zimbabwe, including Professor Ibbo Mandaza, and everybody else. This seems to be a problem with some people. They cannot accept that their leader can be held to account by anybody else. They think he should be only held to account by their party or the membership of the party. If you hold public office, you're accountable to the public because what you do in that office affects everybody, not only just your members. Point number 3. As much as the ladies here have the right to freedom of expression and to vote for whoever they want, it is important to remember that there is no such thing as an absolute right. We all have a duty of care to others. In the enjoyment or exercise of our right, we must be careful we do not deny others their rights or freedoms. I think the importance here of CCC members participating in flawed elections repeatedly, disregarding the repeated warnings by the European Union, SADC, the AU, that we need reforms to be implemented, must be an issue of concern to everybody. MDC CCC leader members participating in last year's elections on the basis of the idiotic lie, like I have plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, hashtag God is in it, is being stupid and irresponsible on the part of the individual. But they've got also to accept the consequences of their folly was to give Zanu PF legitimacy and thus perpetuate the suffering of everyone. That cannot be right. So when somebody points out to you that what you're doing is not right, to say that I'll support Chamisa blindly is being irresponsible. And people cannot turn around and pretend that is acceptable. That is definitely not acceptable. The fourth point I would like to mention here is that it is a sacred duty of all citizens in a democracy to hold leaders to account. Not only those from outside the party, even with those inside the party. It is a duty of everyone, every citizen, to hold leaders to account. It is bad enough that we have seen again and again a situation where some people have chosen not to hold their leaders to account. But in some cases, they've gone one step further. They've taken it upon themselves to stop anybody else holding their leaders to account. They have placed their leaders on a pedestal where they become demigods, and no one should dare hold them to account. That is totally unacceptable. We cannot pretend that Zimbabwe is anything other than a failed state. And the reason for it is because we've got a dysfunctional political system in which some people think they are above the law. No one is above the law. No one is above democratic accountability. And so it is important to remind these ladies that as much as they are free to exercise their right, they have to remember that in exercising that right, they've got a responsibility to the rest of society. I'll just play another video clip of another group of women expressing their support of Chamisa.
Zvenimi zita raChamisa rikutotaura kudarika iye uyu akapawo chairmanship mumba munangagwa akapawo chairmanship asi umbotaurwa but Chamisa kupi Chamisa rikutaurwa zita raChamisa rikutaurwa kunge zita raMwari pese munhu paakangogumbugwa munhu anoti nhai Mwari wangu munhu akangodai nhai Mwari wangu ndozvikuitwa zita raChamisa. RaChamisa rakasimba rine power rine moto. Wakambomuhoiwa akapawo chairmanship nezuro wakambomuwa achitaurwa harimbotaurwa kuti chairmanship but zita raChamisa rotaurwa because mwana wake akazodzwa uya.
I think that is going a bit too far. This issue of pretending that somehow Chamisa has the blessing of God is a result of all these biblical verses. Chamisa claiming that God is in it. That must be addressed and that must be denounced for what it is. Chamisa has repeatedly said God is in it when he carried out some of his plans. When he claimed that CCC was going to win big, he qualified it with hashtag God is in it. Well, CCC did not win big. And clearly, God was not in it. We cannot keep on pretending that God is in it just because Chamisa said so. When it comes to religion, we should not pretend to know what God is saying. If somebody does that, then he has got to have the evidence to show that he is definitely touched by God. Chamisa so far has been making outrageous claims. How could God be involved in a plan that is so ridiculous that I have plugged all vote-rigging loopholes when clearly you have not? We had elections last year in which we didn't have even something as fundamental as a verified voters roll. How could you then claim that you have plugged the vote-rigging loopholes when Mnangagwa is boasting, he was boasting that he was going to frog march the voters to vote for him? We also know that this issue of your vote is your secret was a lie. Ever since 2008, the only time when Zimbabwe got nearest to having free, fair, and credible elections, Zanu PF has increased the number of polling stations, for instance, from about 10 in each constituency in 2008 to over 50 last year. And in 2008, you could vote in any of the 10 polling stations in that constituency. Not anymore. Now is a voters roll specific to a polling station. Zanu PF operatives will have a list of who is registered to vote at that polling station. And with the increased number, the numbers are something like 500 people. In the rural areas, you would know, at least by face, who those 500 people are, because they'll be from the neighboring 2 or 3 villages. And when the results are counted, they are counted at the polling station. So if 300 people voted, the operatives would know who those 300 are. And when the results are being declared, if half of them voted for Zanu PF, the other half voted for the opposition, it will take 30 minutes for those operatives to be able to say, okay, of these 300 who voted, would you think voted for the opposition? So your vote is no longer your secret. The election process in Zimbabwe was so flawed that SADC condemned it, AU condemned it. And to keep on pretending somehow that I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes is the most outrageous statement anyone can make. And then to turn around and say someone like that is touched by God. That is the level of naivety that really shows that we are not ready for healthy and functioning democratic Zimbabwe. You're free to support and belong to any political party you want, but you also have got a responsibility to the rest of the country. How you exercise that right. If you're going to be so gullible that you're going to continue participating in a flawed process to give Zanu PF legitimacy, then the whole country will suffer. And that is the substantive issue that must be addressed here. We do not need voters who are so gullible. They'll do anything that they are told. Man is supposed to be a creature of reason, not somebody who can easily be influenced. He has got to be told, if you're told to do A, B, C, D, it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is, how insane it is, and you will do it. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. We really need an electorate that is responsible. The Greeks were right. The vote should be given to somebody who is educated, knowledgeable, and diligent in holding the leaders to account. Not somebody who is ignorant, naive, and so gullible they'll believe anything they're told. I think those who believed Chamisa's lie last year owe the nation an apology. At least if you don't give it out, please don't do it again, for Pete's sake. And to try to tell us you're doing it because it's your right is the most pathetic argument I've ever seen, I've ever heard. People died in the fight so that people can have the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. But if you're going to continue blindly support somebody who is lying, making such a blatant claim, and then evoking the name of God, and you still believe it, and you still subscribe to that foolish notion that he is touched by God, I think that, to me, shows that you really are not ready to be given the right to vote. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.